this video, I'm going to show you how I repaired this hole in my drywall. Here is a list of the materials and tools that you'll see me using throughout the video. And let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is get rid of all of the broken drywall. The way that I do this is to use my level, and I'll create kind of a square or a rectangular shape, depends on the size of the hole, but a rectangular shape around the drywall. And I use my level because I want to make sure that all my lines are nice and straight so that when I put a new piece of drywall in, it'll fit in pretty easily into that space. Once you're done creating this outline around the damaged drywall, the next thing to do is cut it out. For this task, I'm going to start with a box cutter just to sort of get the outline started. And then once I've got a big enough hole, I'm going to switch to my little handheld saw just because it makes the job a little bit faster. Follow along your outline. Try to make your lines nice and straight, remember, so that it's easier to get that replacement piece of drywall in there once you're done. All right, before you can put the new piece of drywall in, you have to design kind of like a brace for it, sort of like a support system, because it's a pretty large piece of drywall. You want to make sure that it's secure when it rests in there. You don't just want it floating around against the wall, otherwise it's going to fall out, it's going to crack, you're going to have all kinds of problems. So I'm just taking a couple of pieces of scrap wood and measuring about 3 or 4 inches above and below that actual drywall hole itself. And these are going to be the support system for my replacement piece of drywall. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is take those 2 scrap pieces of wood and we're gonna screw them in place behind the drywall. So that they act as a support system. In order to do this, I'm going to use drywall screws to go through the drywall and into the wood and secure it in place. And this is where I ran into an issue because the drywall screw went really easily through the drywall, but it would not go into the wood itself. And as you can see, I tried again on the top, but ran into a similar issue. So what I decided to do instead was use the marks that the screw had made in the wood and just use my drill to make a couple of guide holes so that it was easier to screw into place. So here I am again with attempt number 2, trying to get this brace into place. Make sure that you line up the screw with the guide holes that you made, and it should work like a piece of cake this time. Be careful that you don't screw into the drywall too far. You don't want to damage the drywall with your screw. A good rule of thumb is to screw it in so that it's just slightly lower than the surface of the drywall itself. And I'm just gonna continue on and do the same thing to secure the second piece of scrap wood as a brace for the new drywall piece. Once those are both in place, the next thing you're gonna do is grab your tape measure and measure the opening for your new piece of drywall. Using those same measurements, you're gonna mark off a section of a new piece of drywall. Whatever your measurements are, you're gonna wanna leave a little bit of a gap because you don't want the new drywall piece to fit snugly you want a little bit of a space between the existing drywall and the new drywall that you're gonna put in there. You want this space because you're gonna put some drywall putty in there to seal the gap, seal the surfaces together. So whatever your measurement is, I would go about 1/4 of an inch less, no more than 1/2 an inch less than the measurements that you started with. And then use your box cutter or whatever sharp tool that you have and start cutting out along those lines. Cut out that new piece of drywall. Now I'm gonna take that piece and check it and make sure that it fits. It does, but you can see it's kind of a little snug on one of the sides. I took off 1/4 of an inch on each of my measurements vertically and horizontally, but I feel like I could have done maybe a little bit more than that and still been okay. Definitely wouldn't go past 1/2 an inch. So now I'm trying to screw in the new piece of drywall into the bracing boards that are behind it. And you see I'm running into that problem again where the screw just will not go into the wood. So I use the screw to mark all 4 locations that I'll be drilling into. And then I'm just using my drill to make like a guide hole or a pilot hole, just so that it's easier for the screw to actually go into the wood this time. Line up your screws with each of those guide holes, and then remember you want the screw just below the surface of the drywall. You don't want to go too deep because you don't want to damage your drywall. So here I am just using my box cutter and moving it along each section. I just want to make sure that there is enough gap that I can put some putty into. And if not, then kind of try to clean it out a little bit and then cover up the seams with some drywall tape. You could skip this step if you don't have any drywall tape on hand, but it's just an extra layer of support. If you think about it that way, it just helps those seams kind of stay together when you plaster the putty on there. And speaking of putty, it's time to get going. So grab your putty knife, grab your wall putty, and start spreading it on. Make sure that as you put it on that you are pushing it into the seams. Push it into the crack between the original drywall and the new piece that you just screwed into place. I've got 2 different sizes of putty knives. I start with the small one and just get it on there, and then I'll use my big one to sort of smooth it out as I go. This is gonna take a lot of layers. And so the first layer is not gonna be your finished layer. So don't worry about, don't say to yourself, oh, it doesn't look good, we'll fix it as we go. I bought a special type of putty that goes on pink and it dries white, so you can sort of see it when it's ready. The pink is completely gone and ready to be worked on. So when the pink is completely gone, the next step is to grab some sandpaper and smooth out as best you can any of the rough bumps and lumps that you might have gotten from your first layer of application. I'm using a wall sanding block that's specifically designed for this particular job. I will link in the description to this video any of the tools and materials that I'm using, just so that you can have easier access to what you need. It's kind of a messy, dusty process, so I just like to kind of clean up as I go and get ready for applying some more wall putty. So with this second coat, my focus is to sort of try and smooth things out a little bit. You'll see me try to blend in with the wall a little bit better, the surrounding wall, and fill in if there's any holes in the putty that need to be filled in, this would be the time to do it. If this layer doesn't turn out perfect for you either, don't worry, because you can always repeat this step as many times as you need to. The really important thing is that you don't want to work with the putty for too long, because as soon as you get it out of that container, it starts to dry. So the more that you work with it, the more problems that you're going to end up with. So don't worry if you have to repeat the steps. That's normal. It's going to happen. And it looks like I'm gonna have to apply putty one more time. I'm just inspecting the drywall right now for any holes, gaps, anything that I don't really wanna see. And I'm just gonna take the putty and I'm gonna fill in those spots. So kind of more like a targeted application this time, just really working on smoothing out those parts that are bugging me a little bit. Don't forget to sand it again when it's dry. And then if you're happy with the results, you can move on to the next step. And if you need to do it again, remember you can repeat this process as many times as you need so that you are satisfied with the look of your repair job. The last thing that you have to deal with is the fact that you've got a nice newly repaired section of wall, but it doesn't match the rest of the wall. So your job is to make it match. My wall has texture applied to it. You can buy a wall texturizer that will help you match whatever is already existing on your wall. Just make sure that you're following any instructions that come with your wall texturizer. For example, mine say shake the can really well and spray from a certain distance away from the wall and spray in circular motions, and it'll help you set up the can so that you get the right density of spray. So make sure that you read those instructions. They're really helpful for applying these. Another finishing touch is going to be painting over your newly repaired piece of drywall to make sure that it matches with the existing wall. I also noticed that while I was working, I put the baseboard under a bit of stress, and the paint that usually seals the baseboard to the wall started to crack. So I'm also going to fix that too as part of my finishing touches. So I just wiped the baseboard with a cloth just to get any dust and debris off of it. And then I just ran a bead of caulk down the seam of the baseboard and the wall. And then you just use your finger and some water to smooth out the caulk. Always use water, otherwise you're gonna leave fingerprints in the seam and it's just not gonna look as good. So always make sure that you've got some water handy and your fingers are always wet when you're trying to smooth this out. And then I finished up with some trim paint and some wall color paint to get everything to match. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. And now here's a look at the finished project.